Have you guys heard about cryptocurrency that you can actually take and collateralize so you can get a loan on that? Something that's not taxed? Well, I've got Jesse here with Liquid Loans, who's taken some time out of his day to talk with us more about it so we can get a better understanding. I think a project like this is fascinating because this is exactly what I'm doing in the physical world. This is what people do in real estate or businesses that don't have any debt. They pull some of that equity out to put into other things. Now we're capable of doing that with digital assets. So Jesse, thank you for taking the time to come on. How you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me on, Sam.
I appreciate you taking the time out. So can you give us a very simple understanding where there's several different ways to use liquid loans? And I'm brand new to this. I've just decided to go all in on crypto. And then I found you guys with Hex and Pulsechain and Pulsechain and stuff. But I think a lot of the people who are watching my channel are probably not as familiar with it as I am, and definitely not as familiar with you. So can you just kind of give a brief overview?
Yeah. Yep. So a lot of people in crypto have a problem that they don't even realize that they have. And that's that they have likely one of the best appreciating assets of all time. And at some point, they have it in their head that they're going to sell, right? So when keeping wealth, the challenge is always time, and then how much of a thing that you have, whether it's a piece of real estate or a basketball team or a piece of a car, an old classic car that may go up in value, anything, right?
Or even just stocks. Yeah.
Right. And crypto has outperformed all of those other things, right? But all you hear in the crypto world is how, you need to sell at certain points, right? Oh, I'm going to sell when I see a 2x, or I'm going to sell when I see a 10x or a 20x or 100x or thousands of x. And that's not the mentality that the wealthy use for any other investment opportunity, right? So the wealthiest people in the world don't sell their best appreciating assets. But the challenge is you have to hold on to something for a long, long time, and you can hold on to it for eternity. But then the other challenge is how much of that thing, what quantity of coins do you have? Whenever you sell something in crypto, right, it's all in token count. Every time you sell, of course, you have less tokens than you had before. So it makes it harder for you to capture any future appreciating value when all you do is sell, 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 sell. And I go through some interesting math sometimes with people where if you had 100 coins and I had 100 coins of something, maybe they were worth $20,000 at the time. And if that thing goes up in value and say does 20 doublings, which is for legacy finance, that sounds absurd, but it happens all the time in crypto. So let's say that thing goes through 10 doublings. You started with 20 grand and you sold half your bag every time that it went up.
You get a double and you pull some off the table.
You're like, oh, I got a double. Let me sell half my bag so I have my initial. It sounds logical at first. Let me pull my initial capital out, right? But now you have half as many coins as you started with. And then every time you do that, you just get less and less and less and less and less. So if you were to do that 10 times through 10 doublings, you would have extracted, starting with your $20,000, you would have extracted, you'd have 220,000. But oh wait, there's a bigger problem. You'd also be taxed on all those gains. So maybe you'd have somewhere actually around 150,000. And your 100 tokens would now be 0.009 tokens. You'd have so few tokens, it's ridiculous. Now it would be worth a lot, but you only have a tiny fraction of it, right? Now compare that to the next guy who has the same 100 tokens, that goes through the same price appreciation, and he simply never sells. Never sells. We say this term a lot. It would have gone through 10 doublings, and he would have just watched it go up in value, kept watching and watching and watching and watching. And after 10 doublings, that guy has $20,480,000. So there's a big difference between 150K and 20.5 million, an enormous difference. But it's super challenging if you don't know that you don't have to sell to get any value out. It's too challenging for the everyday person to watch their tokens appreciate without at least selling some off the top. And then as it goes up in value, so if you were to look at all the Genesis Bitcoin or the early Bitcoin addresses, like not a whole lot of those people were able to mentally hold all the way till today and realize there's 6 million X that they could have got, or 6 million% that they could have got. The same holds true with most of the ETH Genesis holders.
You say just from for clarity for myself and anybody who's listening or watching, Genesis just means that that's the initial accounts.
Yeah, like the very original people.
Okay.
Right.
So same story with ETH is what you're saying.
Right. Or it doesn't even have to be Genesis addresses, just the people who got in super early, right? Because there's a couple of things you need to do in any investment or in any crypto or anything. You need to get in early like when it first begins, because that's likely when the price is going to be the lowest. Not saying that something can't launch at a certain price and then dip from there, but I mean, you don't design a project or a protocol or a blockchain if you think that the price is just, correct. If there's no opportunity there, why even build it, right? Why even build the chain? So like the trick is get in early at the very, very beginning and then hold forever. All right. So crypto, so that brings you to like what you mentioned about collateralizing assets. Now, collateralizing crypto it's not really new. There's other platforms that allow you to do the same thing. There's something called MakerDAO, which is the protocol that allows you to collateralize Ethereum. And then in turn, you get a stable coin that's backed by that same Ethereum. And that stable coin is called DAI. All right. And when people mint that DAI, it comes to them in the form of a loan. Liquidity protocol, same thing. You can collateralize Ethereum. You can mint yourself some stable coin, and it's called LUSD. And with liquid loans, which will be launching exclusively on the Pulsechain with zero competition, by the way, at the moment, we welcome anybody else to come in and bring their platforms too. We do want to see a lot of mass adoption on the chain. But at the moment, we're in a really good position because we have the only tool that allows people to extract value without ever selling this asset that is likely to go up in value significantly over the next couple of years or next several years.
The way that we're talking about things my background's in finance and accounting and all that world, and that's not what is taught in that world at all, even slightly, right? So I see a big shift because that's where I'm like, okay, well, you have all these assets, but I have to be able to access that to use it potentially for things to like living, or if I want to make other investments, right? Like I don't want to sell this investment to buy another investment. And is that like, I would see that being potentially, maybe not in the crypto, maybe in the crypto space, but is that like shift from like, oh, I don't actually have to sell my shit to get value out of it? Is that a concept that is hard for a lot of people to grasp?
It's super hard, right? The wealthiest people in the world have realized that. You always hear, oh, how come the billionaires don't pay taxes, right? You hear this a lot. Well, it's because they don't sell. They simply don't sell. Now, people who don't have tremendous wealth are also very scared of the word loan or collateral or liquidation, right? These terms are very scary. So people assume that it's just bad because before you have tremendous wealth, there's like one kind of loan that you get that you hear about as a real young person. You're like, oh, loans must be bad. And that's like, imagine if you had no money, but just to live, you had to borrow somebody else's money. You had to borrow the bank's money. And there's a cost attached to that, and it's always in the form of an interest payment. So you're having to pay back money that you didn't even have to begin with, plus more, right? Just to try and survive, right? So people who don't have something that's appreciating that they can do this with, they get stuck in this endless cycle of, having to pay somebody else. Okay. They're always below the bar. Okay. So that's like one category of people with their money. And then the other category of people with their money is those who are told, hey, you need to pay off everything with cash. Make sure you like own your home outright or buy a car with cash. And well, while that works for some, there's still really the same problem. You know, they're at the bar, they have a comfortable lifestyle, but they save and they spend, and then they save and they spend. And so they're still they're still just melting their own assets away. Their cash that they have, it's gone because they'll save it up, they'll buy a car with it. Now they have less, right? Save up, pay off their house. Now they have less. Now they have an asset that's sitting there that they own outright that they're doing nothing with. Right. So then it brings you to like the third category of people, the people who have the home or they have the crypto or they have those stocks. And instead of just leaving those things sitting there doing nothing, they collateralize against them. Right. So here's how liquid loans works. You can take the native coin of a blockchain, the coin that is the most liquid asset on the chain. It's paired to all sorts of other assets. And it's likely to appreciate a lot. And instead of selling it, you can put it into a vault, and you can draw out stable coins or mint stable coins against that value. Now you are able to set your own collateral ratio because there has to be a liquidation point. The liquidation point would be 10% over what you mint. So if you minted yourself $10,000 worth of stable coins, if you only had $12,000 worth of Pulsechain inside of a vault, and the value of those Pulse coins is moving around, and it gets down to only $11,000 for the Pulse coin, guess what? You're going to lose those Pulse coins because the stable coin is at risk of no longer being backed by anything. Okay, so instead you should probably collateralize much safer, so that you can hold on to your appreciating asset. So what you would do is you would put in something significantly more. You would put in
$200, $300, $400,
$50,000 worth of Pulse coin, or $100,000 worth of Pulse coin, 200,000, whatever the case may be. So the value of the Pulse, that coin, that crypto, can go up and down, but you can still extract value. You can still take a $10,000 loan, or $15,000 loan, $20,000 loan. And then over time, as the value of the original collateralized asset goes up, you can just keep extracting value behind that. And the added benefit to this is there's no tax and there's no interest payment.
Okay, a lot of people touch on that. This is the dichotomy. So I used to work in banking, right? And you come in and they want me to sell you shit that's not in your best interest, and that's why one of the reasons I didn't want to be there, right? But this is why I was like, oh, this is awesome. There's no interest and there's no payment schedule to pay that back off. Can you talk about that? Because those are two amazing features.
Yeah. So in traditional finance, if a bank's going to give you money, realize that they could have put that somewhere else. They could have put that into some sort of investment stock or something. Okay. And they could have made money on that money, but instead they're going to make money off of you. Okay. So they have to charge you interest. They have to collect and have more at the end of your loan than they started with, because the money's coming from them. Now, in crypto, with a tool such as liquid loans, the money's not coming from anybody else. It doesn't come from liquid loans. It doesn't come from other crypto holders that have put assets into a pool that you lend out of, which is how Aave works, by the way, which is another lending platform. Horrible interest rates, by the way, horrible. Whether you're a lender or a borrower, you get the bad end of the stick. But with liquid loans, all you've done is the whole contract is a smart contract. Instead of a counterparty and having risk with other people or a central entity, a bank, something like that, it's simply a smart contract code that you enter into. You put in Pulse coin. It's your own Pulse coin to begin with. You collateralize against it, and the code says, hey, it's going to hold that as collateral. You can withdraw all your excess collateral value and stuff. You can move those numbers around because the only thing that the contract cares about is that the value that you mint to yourself in the form of a loan is retained plus 10%, unless you pay it back. And then it's like, it's all unlocked. But you've just entered into your own agreement with a smart contract on the blockchain that nobody can stop. So because it's your own money and nobody's handing it to you, they don't need to make money off of you. So what ends up happening is you're making money off of yourself because your original asset is just sitting in there going up in value and there's no interest payment. Like you don't have to have
to wait. You're getting paid to wait. You're getting paid
exactly.
to wait. Like,
you don't have to. There's no like there's nobody to pay interest to. So it's interest free. What that also does is opens up billions of people on the planet who, for their own beliefs, are not allowed to use products, financial products that have some sort of interest in it. So liquid loans opens the door to the entire world. It resides on the blockchain. Nobody can stop it. It's completely decentralized, and it's just code that people interact with that anybody can use. And the only thing they have to have is some crypto to begin with.
So, okay, so you mentioned that I think you said immutable, and this is a protocol, not like a project that's going to be continuing working on. I'm new, like crypto's been in the peripherals for the last like 24 months or several years, and it just keeps growing. Like that peripheral gets closer and closer, and now it's front and center for me. But it's been front and center since I decided to stop paying attention to Tesla about 3 weeks ago. So I'm very new to this, but I'm focusing on it. And one of the things that I hear perpetually is like scams or things along those lines. What is like what would be like a risk? What would be something that would allow, like, is there a risk, or like what could potentially be a risk to somebody who is doing a loan? Is there, you know how with certain coins, so like with Hex, right? The OA address has a bunch of Hex, right? And it's going to probably be in their best interest to retain it, but that is a possibility that they could start selling. Like there's nothing like that because this is different. Is that correct? Or can you explain that to me if I'm trying to understand?
Well, with a lot of, like with any crypto, there's usually a wallet or a handful of wallets that has a lot of them, right? And like it's never in the interest of those entities just to kill the golden goose, right? To just dump the project down to zero. It doesn't help anybody, right? These people are very smart, like whales as they're called, you know, mega millionaires or even billionaires. Like they're in this game for the same reasons, to hold on to something that's going up in value forever or for a really, really, really long time, right? So there are scams in crypto, absolutely. A lot of them on the Binance Smart Chain last like 24 hours and like run up and then it just crashes down to zero. But you don't see that with like legitimate protocols. And usually the whales in the protocol are there to protect the protocol, to see the longevity of it for a long time. Now that's also demonstrated. We have a sacrifice phase right now where people can demonstrate their political statement that traditional fiat-backed stablecoin systems are garbage. And what we saw recently is a giant whale came in, actually an ETH Genesis wallet guy. He came in with $6 million, but he locked his commitment for up to 2 years, for a full 2 years. So that shows, wow, this guy believes in the same things that Liquid Loans believes, that you should hold on to an asset for a really long time and never sell it. This guy has aligned his beliefs. So
is there a, like with say Hex, there's Hex, right? But with Liquid Loans, there's the USDL and then the loan token. So are those like, is there going to be OA addresses that have USDL and loan tokens or is that not how it works?
So all the supply, so the entire supply of the loan token is in existence on day one. It all exists. There's no extra minting after that. And the lion's share of all of these things are going to be with the community. Okay, so if you're now, like I said, a guy who's referred to as God Whale, just participated, and that guy maybe will have a large supply of, of the tokens,
potentially, yeah.
right? But it's in his best interest for his own bags to hold on to those, and he's not dump on everybody's head. History shows that he's never done that before, like just dump and dump and dump. History shows that even with Hex, he stakes up to 15 years and he never ever sells. So to think his behavior would be any differently in this protocol, like that's just silly.
Okay.
He still has his original ETH from years ago, right? He just never sells.
It's so okay. So there's none of the token. The USDL is only minted when Pulse is into a vault.
Yes, USDL comes into existence when somebody creates a loan smart contract and mints it to them, mints it to themselves. Absolutely. Now, another key point in this is there is no interest, but there is a one-time fee when you mint some USDL. That fee goes straight to the stakers of the loan token. So holders of this loan token can go ahead and stake into a big pool, and proportionally to your size in the pool, you'll be collecting the fees from other people never selling their Pulse and minting USDL out against it. Now, I do want to point out a couple other use cases for liquid loans, and it's not just because people want to extract value because they never want to sell. It's not because they're trying to live off of that. This is a decentralized stablecoin, fully algorithmic, that we can flood the entire chain with and get away from the centralized stablecoins like USDC, USDT. Like they're just garbage. They're garbage in the way they work. So I think you're going to see some big players come in and mint themselves a whole bunch of USDL, and then take that USDL and go be liquidity providers and pair it against other coins. You're going to see USDL paired to Pulse. You're going to see it paired to Hex. You're going to see it paired to, there's some other projects that have said they're going to use it. Internet Money. You're going to see it paired to Free Pulse. You're going to see it paired to what the Power City guys are doing. There's a whole bunch of projects who have already come out and said, yes, we like the idea of a completely decentralized stablecoin, and that's what we're going to use to create our own token projects for our protocols. So it's not just for the people who want to extract value and go buy their groceries with it. Like, this is for major protocols to flood the chain with USDL and get away from USDC and Tether.
USDT, yeah. So question on that, just as more hypothetical. First to clarify, so there's a possibility that some may get airdrop tokens.
Correct.
If they chose, right? Potentially that doesn't have any value or anything, right? But USDL could potentially be the USDC on Pulse. That's a possibility, right? Like, it could be the thing that people use to primarily transact, because you would think that if Pulse is as successful as we believe it probably will be, that there's going to be somebody else that's going to come along with a algorithmically tied Pulse, right? Because it's just a smarter way of doing things in a lot of people's opinion, right? Like, it just seems to get out of the fucking fiat completely, like don't have any ties to it whatsoever.
Yeah, and can I touch on that?
Yes, please.
So with fiat just by itself has its own problems. It's all owned by governments. It has, inflation that some would consider out of control. And it's like you have no say in it. It's just constantly being minted or being printed, and the purchasing power of that dollar goes down year after year after year, right? Things just get more and more and more and more expensive. Okay. Now, what the centralized stable coins such as USDC and Tether have done is they have said, we're going to take in some fiat and we're going to mint some USDC backed by that fiat. And they then decide to fractionally reserve something that's already fractionally reserved. So now you have fiat that has major inflation problems. It's fractionally reserved. Not all of it's out there for all the debt that's out there. But then you have these big corporations that come in and say, oh, now we're going to do the same thing on top of that and compound the problem with Tether and USDC. Okay, so now you have a whole bunch of USDC out in the market or Tether that's not fully backed. Not every one of them could get out and into something that's got its own major problems as well. And they have admin keys. They can turn them off. They can stop people from being able to redeem back at the issuers with them and stuff. And it's like, why are we dealing with this? Why are we the reason crypto was invented was to get away from counterparty risk and middleman. Yet with these centralized stable coins, what we're doing is we're latching ourselves on to the very problem crypto was invented to get away from. So this is why instead, what you do is you tie a stable coin not back to a fiat dollar, but back to a dollar's worth of something else. Now we could have said we could tie it to a bread basket's worth of Pulse, or an ounce of gold's worth of Pulse, or a euro's worth of Pulse. But just because people like what a dollar represents, this protocol says it's going to be backed by a dollar's worth of Pulse. And in that fashion, you completely eliminate all the counterparty risk, but it still is a stable coin that is worth $1. And the mechanisms that keep it pegged back to $1 are actually all the same as what USDC has. But instead of being backed by $1, it's backed by Pulse. It's a really, really beautiful system when people realize, wait a minute, like all the counterparty risk is removed, but it works a lot the same way as those fiat ones work, but they're just simply not backed by fiat. People have this clicking event where they're like, oh my gosh, this is the reason why crypto was invented.
It makes perfect sense when you're talking about. So for anybody who doesn't know what fractional reserves are, if you have, say, $10 million of fiat, they might actually create 100 million potentially. Like that would be the max in like the physical world, like something like $100 million worth of USDC, right, from my understanding of that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think in the legacy world, it's just having way more debt than there is dollars to cover all that debt. And then in crypto, it's having way more stable coins than can ever be redeemed back for the fiat that those stable coins are supposed to be, redeemable for.
Okay, so I want to talk about
liquid loans real quick though. Yep. With liquid loans, every single USDL that's ever minted is fully backed.
But 110%, right? 110%?
Yeah, there's even more. There's always more value backing it than ever exists.
I love this. This is why I was like, I need to reach out because this is something that I can get behind. This is what, like, this is a duplex. I'm pulling money out of this so I can put it into other things, right? Somebody else is paying the bills on it. Like, it's fucking awesome. Same type of idea that you use in this world, but in the digital world, and getting out of, it's way less friction. You know what a process is to get like money out of the house? Like, you can't just do it in 20 minutes, right? Yeah, right. I got like, it's probably 4 to 8 weeks to like get money out of the house. It's so cumbersome. But so we've got borrowers, stability pool people, right?
Depositors. We call them stability depositors.
Okay, stability depositors, and then loan token stakers, right? So each one of these has their own benefits. But let's start with a borrower, because when I read the white paper, it appeared that some of the liquidation of in the pool of Pulse, when liquidation happens, from my understanding of reading it, that's why I want to ask because I'm not sure, the borrowers can actually increase the amount of Pulse that they actually have. Is that accurate, or does that just go to the stability holder?
So normally, okay, so the system itself as an average, as a whole, will steer all the collateral levels above 150%. It'll do that algorithmically by adjusting various things, adjusting the borrowing fee, by turning on what's called recovery mode, which prevents people from further hindering the collateral health of the system and only allowing people to take actions that help the collateral health, right? So as an average, the entire code of this thing steers people towards safe collateral levels. And I think what we'd like to see is what's over on ETH. People are collateralizing at 300%, 400%, okay? And as an average. But Pulse is brand new. It's likely to be a little bit more volatile than ETH. So I think that we'll see people collateralizing even healthier than that in the beginning, in the onset. And it wouldn't surprise me to see people collateralize at 1,000% or 1,500%. So that doesn't prevent people from coming in and only collateralizing at 130% or 111%, 110%. Okay. But if they do that, remember, they've already got the value out. They've got it in USDL. So if their collateral falls to at risk of no longer backing that USDL, the ability for their Pulse to become liquidated, that feature turns on. And anybody in the community can log into the DApp and see, well, this vault here is at risk of no longer backing the USDL. I see a liquidation button activated. Let me hit that button. And the person who hits that button actually collects $200, and they collect 0.5% of all the Pulse from that. And then the rest of it gets spread across pool participants in this thing called the stability pool. So instead of a liquidation getting sent to the markets and getting market dumped and then further hurting the price of Pulse, instead it gets absorbed by stability depositors who have put in USDL, and some of their USDL burns. So as those stability deposits, they're essentially they're paying the debt, they're paying the loan off. Mm-hmm. But it would have been in a market dip, and they just got Pulse at a 10% discount when that happened. But as a collective group, right? So maybe one wallet in there collected 10 cents worth of Pulse, and 90 cents worth of USDL was burned. Maybe the next guy's a big whale, right? So he collected, $1,000 or $10,000 worth of Pulse. It depends on the size of that debt that was just liquidated. But, the bigger guy, he's going to get, he's going to collect some Pulse, and 10% less of that of value in USDL is going to just burn itself out of existence. So this is the same mechanism if you were to pay back a loan, actually. If you borrow USDL, if you come back with USDL and you pay it back, your USDL burns, the debt goes away. The same thing happens in a liquidation. The Pulse goes to the stability depositors, who essentially their USDL burns and your debt goes away.
So the only additional benefit borrowers can get is by paying attention to, say, liquidate the thing. Is that something that should be done automatically, or is that something that's going to be done automatically in the future? Or
it will end up being automatic, because people write bots and stuff for this. There's developers out there that are going to see this opportunity. They're going to run a bot, and we'll probably have a warning at the top that says, hey, well, you may be able to liquidate manually now. It's likely that in the future bots will be running this function.
And that happens at below 110%.
Right, because the borrower already got all that value out up front. He already got it. Like you can't. Correct.
He got all of it. Yes, exactly. That makes perfect sense. Okay, that's fascinating, because I wasn't sure about that. So the only additional benefit borrowers can get is through, before this is a automated process, but the USDL depositors, they get paid in two ways.
They also get the loan token. So you want to incentivize people for being at the ready in the stability pool with their USDL. And you do that by giving them an emission of loan tokens.
What does that mean?
An emission, a residual payout of loan tokens.
Okay. Oh, so they continually get loan tokens by the longer they keep it in there?
Every single second. Every single second. And the longer they're in there, of course, they're just accumulating and accumulating. But the emission rate goes down and down and down over time. It gets harder and harder and harder to actually accumulate these things, right? So if you're early on, you can get a whole bunch. They're like just coming to you. But then at the 1 year mark, that rate that you're able to get those gets cut in half. And then the next year, cut in half again, cut in half again. So like it just gets harder and harder and harder to get your hands on these things. And not to mention, if other people are coming in and participating in that pool, you're also being diluted. So there's like an exponential effect where the early people in there are able to collect the most, and it just becomes absurd over the years, like how hard it is to get your hands on these. Now, what do you do with these loan tokens? You take them and you stake them for the fees.
And so deposit holders get the liquidation of Pulse in exchange for their USDL, and they get a minted loan token, which you can stake. Is that part?
They're already minted on day one. There's a pool that releases to them, but yes, they get to be the beneficiaries of the release of that loan token pool. Yes.
Okay, so now you said stake, so you can take your loan token. If there's a marketplace where you could liquidate that, you could, but the idea is probably a good portion of people are probably going to stake that.
I would say yeah. So you could sell it for sure, but it's probably best to just stake it, because then you have like generational, like you just have an income coming in, and that income is going to move with whatever the markets are. So let me give you an example.
This is crazy. This loan token.
So if the value of Pulse goes up, the size of the loans goes up.
Mm-hmm.
People say, oh, look at all the value I have in Pulse. I can mint myself $100,000 with no problem and still be way over collateralized. Okay. So you see people, the loans will get bigger, which means it's just starting to flood the market with this USDL, which is a good thing. And the collectors of the fees are collecting a high volume of fees while Pulse is going up in value. Now, as Pulse goes down in value, you'll see people paying back their loans, and you'll see some unfortunate people, or maybe it was their play to under collateralize, get liquidated, and instead the stability depositors are paying off the loan. So loans are getting paid back in market dips, whether it's through the borrower themselves or through the stability depositors paying for it. And you'll see that the quantity of USDL out in the markets gets less as the value of Pulse goes down, and it gets more quantity as the value of Pulse goes up. All right. So you got like, it just moves with the markets, and the collectors of the fees are the stakers of the tokens. So they're literally getting the most value that can possibly be collected for fees.
Yeah.
Right. Depending on what the markets are deciding the value of Pulse is at that time.
So
that value translates all the way to the value of the coin itself.
So reading through the paper, the loan stakeholders, they receive USDL and Pulse. Can you tell, where does the USDL come from, and then where does the Pulse come from for the loan stakers?
Right. So this gets better and better and better. Okay. So whenever somebody takes a loan, they're minting USDL. A little bit of that USDL gets shaved off and goes to the stakers. Okay. But those stakers also collect Pulse. Now, to understand where the Pulse comes from, you have to understand that there's Pulse in the vaults. That's the collateral for USDL. And you have to understand where the value of any asset on a chain comes from. All right. So over on Uniswap or PulseX or any other DEX, a trading decentralized exchange, there's these things called token pairings, where you have two tokens that are tradable against each other. You can put in more of this one and get out this one. You can put in more of this one and get out that one, right? And those ratios change based on people buying and selling. And that ratio change is what defines all prices in crypto. Okay. So I do want to make this very clear for new people. You're fairly new to crypto. So let me give you an example of how that works. If you minted yourself a random token, just a simple token with no special features or anything, and you had 10 of them, and you put them in a pool. Oh, this is also going to explain why market cap is stupid. Okay, so you actually mint a trillion of them. Okay, and you like airdrop them out to everybody, but you keep 10 of them. You say, well, I'm going to put 10 of them into a liquidity pool, and I'm going to pair it or make it tradable against 10, stable coins, 10 USDC or something. Okay, because there's 10 and 10, because we know the 10 USDC are worth $10, then these 10 tokens are worth $1 a piece. If you were to buy one of them, it would be $1. The market cap, because you made a trillion of them, is now $1 trillion, even though there's only 10 of these things in a pool, right? But the markets are going to say, well, that's stupid. There's no way the valuation of that random token should be $1 trillion. So they'd end up just dumping them down and changing those ratios. They'd say, oh, here's a quick way to, like, there's trillion of them out there.
Yeah.
So out of those trillion tokens, people are going to say, I'm going to extract the value out of these. Let me go dump them in that pool. And they're changing the ratios in that pool. Now, here's where it gets really, really interesting. How prices move in crypto. This is how all prices are formed in crypto. Let's say you sold you bought one token. Now, because the ratio was equal and there were 10 USDC and 10 random tokens, that means you would have had to put in 1 USDC and you would have been able to get out 1 token. The first token cost you $1, but now the ratio's changed. So now there's 11 USDC
for 10,
supplying the value to 9 tokens, right? So it's literally 11 divided by 9. The second token, because of the ratio change, would cost you $1.22, right? You just changed the ratio. There's 11 USDC supplying the value to something it's paired to, being this random token that there's only 9 of, supplying the value to 9 tokens. And now that means the second token that you wanted to buy out of that pool would cost you $1.22. That's how the prices move in crypto.
Because there's a fixed supply in that pool.
Because that's slippage. That's called slippage in these pools. All right. You bought the first one for $1. It slipped the ratio. So now the second one costs $1.22. Then the next one costs $1.50 or something. Next one costs $2. And then the more and more that are attempted to be bought out of this pool, the ratios change drastically and it moves those prices around. Now, we started with a low liquidity pool. There's only 10 and 10. But check this out. What if I had $1 million of USDC on one side of the pool, and I had over on the other side of the pool 1 million of these random tokens? The cost of the first one to ever be bought would still be $1. But what's the ratio change? It's so insignificant that the second one to be bought is still $1. It's $1.000000 whatever.
Yep.
One. And then the next one to be bought, it's so insignificant it doesn't matter, because this is thick liquidity. You put in a whole bunch of tokens and a whole bunch of these other tokens, in this case USDC, so the slippage is less. But low liquidity pools, the slippage is high. Okay, I know this is mind-blowing.
No, this is awesome. Thank you for sharing, because I've never seen this perspective.
This is how all prices in crypto work. All of them. The only thing price cares about is the ratios in these liquidity pools or the order books on the exchanges.
And this is probably a new question. So a liquidity pool is like an exchange, it sounds like in my mind, but
it's automated. It's in code. It's just in code, and people can put in coins into these pools, and then the code takes care of the rest through that slippage and through those ratios I just described. So people put in more of this one, and
A liquidity pool is going to be two things, generally speaking, where an
Usually.
exchange is hundreds or thousands, right? Kind of thing.
Well, you could go to
Of
Uniswap and
pairs.
there's thousands of tokens, but all those thousands of tokens will have like
One for
find
one.
a
Yes,
pairing.
each individual will have a one for one, but then you can pair
Yeah.
this with 4 different ones if you cared to. Like you
Well,
just
right.
change it to this one, then change it back or something like that. Is that
Right.
understanding?
And then there's a stuff called automatic routing and stuff that makes it even a little more complicated.
It's still
But at the end of
fascinating
all
world.
of it, but in the most simple form, you have a liquidity pool, it's just two tokens paired to each other.
Okay, so the USDL comes from the fee for taking out a loan, which the
Right,
fee.
but-
Go ahead.
Correct. But now I have to explain where the pulse comes from. Now that you understand how all liquidity pools of all tokens work. If Ethereum was to dump in price because it's tied back to Bitcoin somewhere else, so the value of Ethereum goes down, the thing that it's paired to in any pool comes down in value as well. So if Ethereum was worth $2,000 and it's paired to, a bunch of coins, if Ethereum goes down in value, these things go down in value too. That's why everything in crypto follows each other. You have Bitcoin dumps, Ethereum dumps, Chainlink dumps, everything dumps with it. Now you can decorrelate from that effect a little bit through pairing to stable coins, kind of. But it's interesting because stable coins are not as stable as people think during volatility. So for example, if Ethereum is paired to USDC and Ethereum dumps in price by 10%, USDC for at least a period of time will be worth 90 cents.
Until it's fought back up and arbitraged away or whatever.
So now it requires people to buy it back up, changing those ratios in the pools, and it brings it back to $1. And then you can take that USDC and either just hold it and know that you got it at a good price. But it can be difficult because if you bought it with Ethereum that dumped and all you did is buy USDC that dumped and you're like, all you did is capture that 10% quickly, which means that Ethereum eventually will go back up to where it started.
Correct.
Right. But all you're doing as an arbitrager is you're capturing that 10% instantly. Okay. Because it's going to go back. It's going to go up relatively quickly within hours usually. Okay. Now with USDL, you have the same opportunity. If the value of USDL falls, either because somebody changed the ratio because they did a big market dump of it, or because the value of Pulse falls, that same arbitrage opportunity exists where you can buy that cheap USDL, changing the ratios, bringing it back to $1 on the DEX. Okay. And why would you do that? Because you're guaranteed inside the protocol to be able to get $1 worth of Pulse for that USDL that you just bought for less than $1. Now that Pulse that you're getting comes from the lowest collateralized vault. The guy who's right there at the liquidation point, who clearly isn't paying his loan back. And what the system does is it reaches into that vault, it removes USDL from that riskiest vault, and it burns away that equivalent value of debt. It burns that USDL and it gives that arbitrager Pulse. But there's a fee that comes out of that goes to the stakers. Now, I'll talk about that fee in a second, but the most important part of this puzzle is that you just saved the guy from being liquidated by being an arbitrager. First off, there's always an opportunity. If the markets are dumping, you're going to see USDL shoot back up to $1 very, very quickly because there's always a guarantee that you're going to be able to get $1 worth of Pulse. And you're getting $1 worth of Pulse from the lowest and riskiest vaults and literally saving them from liquidation and raising their collateral health as you do it.
Don't they get liquidated, or I'm not understanding that portion, I guess.
No, unless they fall under 110%, they're not liquidated. So there's always so imagine if people fall under, vaults fall under 110%, those ones get liquidated. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. That could have been a stop loss for those people. It could have been maybe they think the markets are going to continue dumping. So they said, you know what? I'm actually in a better position if I do let it liquidate,
Because then you
right?
have,
So it's like a stop loss. But what the system does during the redemption process that I just explained, the arbitrage event, it reaches into the vault of the lowest, riskiest vault, the guy who's right at 110, who's not liquidated yet, and it pays his debt off for him. And it doesn't, he keeps that 10%. Like, so if he was at 110%, he keeps that extra 10%. He never loses that.
okay. So he's at 111, just right, or 110.1 or something. And that, when does that get triggered? When that 10%
When he
goes,
falls under 110%.
so at 10, anything,
But he can be redeemed. Anybody can be redeemed against. Like, it doesn't matter what your collateral health is, anybody can be redeemed against, but it always would go from the bottom up. So redemptions will typically happen in severe volatility when the markets are like really dumping, because it's actually cheaper to just swap your USDL for something as opposed to redeem back into the protocol. But you have to have, when markets are super volatile, then it actually becomes better to redeem, and it pegs the value back to $1, and it saves the lowest collateralized vaults from being liquidated. The guy who's right at 110.1 or 111% or 112%. It's literally like a benevolent entity came in and paid your loan off for you. Now you still lose the pulse, but you don't get liquidated and lose that extra 10%. And it increases the collateral health of the entire ecosystem when this redemption happens, right? Because it just eliminated the riskiest vault. And then the next
liquidation versus redemption, like redemption, what you're describing, right, can increase the collateral of the pool, but that seems to have the same trigger as liquidations in my mind, and I'm missing something, I think.
A redemption can happen to any vault in the entire ecosystem, but it always happens from the lowest collateralized vault up.
And so a redemption is going to be when somebody says, here's USDL, I want Pulse?
Yes.
Okay. So the redemption is even if the lowest collateralized vault is 124, it's whatever, right? But somebody goes through and redeems their USDL for Pulse, and it's 100 tokens, and they're doing 100 here, right? So you take the 100, then now this person doesn't, they have like that 10% extra value, or that 100,
so
100,
yeah, $100 worth of Pulse would leave that vault. 100 USDL worth of debt would get burned. And that guy who is at 124% collateral ratio, maybe he's now at 125% collateral health. It just made him a little bit healthier. He did lose a little bit of Pulse during that, but that's the risk he put himself into because he was the lowest collateralized vault on the totem pole. And he was redeemed against, and the system just tried to help him, steer him towards a safer collateral ratio. And it didn't take away all his Pulse. It just was a simple redemption. Remember at the beginning, you put in Pulse, you mint USDL. So there has to be a mechanism that goes full circle where people can put USDL back in and get Pulse back out. But you make that more expensive than just trading on the DEXs.
And it's more expensive.
Well, there's a 0.5% fee if you're going to do a redemption.
Okay.
And the fee ratchets up actually based on volume and time, so that it just gets really expensive if you try to do a bunch of redemptions. You're just eating yourself with fees. So it prevents people from being able to take advantage of this system. Like if a big whale came in, he's like, oh, I got $1 billion for the billion USDL. Let me just redeem. It would just eat him with fees. It would eat him away. Right? It's cheaper just to go swap. Okay. Or just so, but anyway, the fee gets shaved off of the Pulse and goes to the stakers of the loan token.
Gotcha. Okay. So the Pulse and USDL that the loan token gets comes from the USDL comes from the fee
from the
on,
borrowing fee.
and
And then the
then
pulse comes
is
from
on
any
the exit.
redemption. Redemptions aren't even going to happen. Like
very
they're not
often.
going to happen as frequently as borrowing, because you could trade. You could just go swap and it's much cheaper. Like you're going to find pulse paired to USDL. You're going to find like just go to a DEX and swap your USDL if you like. It's way cheaper to do that than to do a redemption. But there is arbitrage opportunities when the markets for pulse are just like dumping, right? The system itself has to protect itself during severe volatility of pulse. And that's done with this redemption function to steer everyone towards safer collateral levels, to save the lowest collateralized vaults from being liquidated, and to peg the value of the USDL back to $1.
Wow. So this is I just got my thing set up so that I can actually sacrifice when after at some point later today before that 10-day period runs out. I don't want to take up more of your time, but I want to acknowledge you for taking the time to share the details with us. I found this fascinating. I learned a bunch. Where would be the best way for people to just learn more about, liquid loans?
Yeah, so we have a ton of content on liquidloans.io. We have articles in there. We have a giant white paper. We have a knowledge section. There's videos. You can type liquid loans on YouTube and you'll find our channel. And then we have a Twitter, Liquid Loans IO. We have a Telegram that's jam-packed full of, I think, between 9,000 and 10,000 people. People are always asking questions. There's always admins in there answering questions and stuff. A ton of content, by the way. And that's t.me/liquid loans. And we are currently in a sacrifice phase where if you believe that there's a better way to run stable coins, and you believe in getting away from centralized counterparty risk, the whole reason crypto was invented, you could participate in a sacrifice phase. And you can see the details of that at thesacrifice.io.
And I'll put links down below for the Twitter and the YouTube and liquid.io or liquidloans.io or whatever it is, down below in the comments. So I appreciate you taking that. Oh, yeah. This is the last question. So with loan tokens, so say there's 2 trillion that get minted and then that's the cap. There's no more that's ever going to be minted. Right. What portion of that goes? Is it proportional based on they're free?
It's all proportional based on numbers that we see in the sacrifice phase.
Okay.
Because the sacrifice phase represents people's, political statement and how much they're curious about, want to get involved with this. So the total supply will be, a reflection of that.
Okay, cool. That'll be interesting as more information comes out from that. Thank you, Jesse. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.